You know what? I think it's probably been eons, hell, it could even be years since I touched on the whole topic of feminism on this podcast. And frankly, considering that I'm talking about it on this episode, it feels like it's been such a long time. Meaning that I can probably take some hits at it and hopefully, I may have a little bit more knowledge on the entire thing. Especially considering that I'm about to question if it's some form of misogyny. But before I can get into any of that, where are my manners? I should have started with an intro. Welcome to the Breakdown Podcast, where I talk about love, sex, and relationships from a guy's perspective, as well as a bunch of other guy shit. The man on the mic is Sir Denver B. This is a much shortened, less edity, less instrumentally, or should I say no instrumentally version of the podcast, which allows me to still spread some ideas and give you guys a bunch of content while I'm on break. And because there's less work to do, it means that I have more time to actually chill and rest. And for this episode, we need to talk about feminism. Now, I have not spoken about feminism as a topic in and of itself for years at this point. I feel like the last time I spoke about feminism was probably 2021 or 2022. But, I could be wrong about that. I haven't really been checking, but all in all, I did stumble upon this particularly interesting tweet that I felt just needs to be discussed. Now, I should have discussed this tweet amongst one of the other episodes, but while I was on season and I saw it and I really wanted to discuss it, I felt like there was a lot here that need to be unpacked. So I figured, let me just have it handled on its own. Now, it was a tweet that was posted up by a Twitter handle of someone or some group of people that is known as Homath, which states feminism is the strongest form of misogyny. Now, this one's a bit of a long one, so buckle up. So it says, and I quote, "Women have lower muscular power, higher sensitivity to negative emotions, more likely to act out of fear, and less access to rationality than men. They are also less interested in building than men are, such as in math, science, and engineering, by about 10 to 1, and they cluster around medium IQ, meaning they are fewer among the gifted and genius levels, also meaning fewer morons. Nature did not design women to be equal leaders, builders, explorers, soldiers, and laborers. Most are better suited to be mothers and nurturers. Feminism tells women that these are weak, sad choices. That is the purest form of hate. What you are, at the core, is inferior. Be more like men," they say. "I believe that life is better when everyone has the free choice to pursue what they want to do and be, and then are selected or rejected based on competence. Feminists believe that women need to be artificially placed in traditionally male positions because otherwise they cannot compete except for the 1 in 10. This moves the other 9 women out of their strongest roles in life and into their weakest. This is because they fear occupying their strongest roles. They've been told those roles are weak, stupid, and oppressive by decades of institutionalized emotional abuse. I want women to be women because I think that's good. Feminists want women to be men because they think being a woman is bad. They also believe that they need special handouts to help them pretend they achieved this on their own. I don't believe women are bad or inferior. Feminists do." End quote. Okay, this is a lot to unpack. This is quite a lot to unpack. And I do intend on getting into my thoughts on the entire idea of feminism and all, but first let me try and see if I can handle a bunch of aspects of this entire tweet, because there's actually quite a bit that's been said here. There's quite a bit, some you can agree with, some you may probably disagree with, but at the end of it, this isn't about who's right or who's wrong. It's just about the idea of feminism and, whether I agree with some of the shit that's being said or not. Now, when I start trying to look at a bunch of the stuff that's been put here, there are some things that I agree with. One, the whole thing that a lot of feminists have been asking for, dedicated spaces that can allow other women to grow and supersede men. It is something that I have seen. Okay, it's not exactly feminists per se, but you do see a lot of that push when you look at the corporate world more so. The whole idea of making sure that you have a certain quota for women in leadership, you have a certain quota in certain departments, if you'd like to say it like that. That whole idea does kind of raise a couple of questions, because if you're bringing people in based off of quota, then it suddenly now starts to affect a lot of the competence, because if you only have 3 women and you're supposed to have, like, say 3 women at the very least in a certain, group of seats, and then you bring them in, then there's a possibility that you've brought in, say, 1 very able woman and like 2 incompetent ones, or even like 2 very able women and like 1 incompetent one, while the rest of the seats are being fought over by men who are trying to show that they are the most competent. So whatever remaining seats are there means that the men that are there are probably the most competent by design, or the most capable of getting themselves into those seats by design. So that one I can totally agree with. I've spoken about how there was a point in time where every single major bank had a financial package, a financial tool or instrument for women, but it's not like they had much of them for the youth in most of those banks. And that is a very clear idea of, trying to accelerate women by like giving them that extra push. But it's like, why not give it to a bunch of the younger men as well? So I do get the whole like asking for incentives so that they can surpass men and how that is a problem. And I can get that it goes beyond just, your typical corporate side. There's the corporate side of it with like acceleration programs for women only. There's the banking industry and how they're offering products tailored for women. Hell, there's even Hollywood itself that was busy trying to put female leads in movies that predominantly had men or were predominantly made for men. So it's like they do a female remake of it, which has had, not so nice results. And I can get why that's a problem. But now the part where I start to disagree is the part where the very same person who is saying that, they want a reality and they believe that life is better when everyone has the free choice to pursue what they want to do, is also, even before they get to that point, saying that most women are naturally designed to be mothers and nurturers. Now, I'm not saying that what he's saying is wrong. It's just when you say one and you're like, oh, you're better off as a mother, it's like now you're going back to the same thing that a lot of women are complaining about, where it's like a lot of people look at women as nothing more than their reproductive capabilities and their motherly qualities. Like they can be more than that, which is something I also agree with. Women can be more than that. They don't just have to be mothers or nurturers. They don't just have to be useful because of their ability to produce children. But when it comes to the idea of feminists trying to turn women into men, there I can definitely say that there's some bits that I can agree to versus disagree with. Because on one end, it's like, yes, they want to make sure that these women are getting into the upper tier positions, that they're fighting for in terms of equality. Even though there is equality at the bottom of the pyramid, they're trying to fight for the equal positions at the top. They're trying to fight to make sure that they make way more than the man. But like, you look at a lot of the same women that are saying stuff like this, they still want the man to pay for the date. They still want the man to pay for most of the bills in the household should they end up together. They still want the man to be the sole breadwinner while she has her money, and they will live by this ideology of his money is ours, my money is mine. Or they will say that, you can drop men, you don't have to be in relationships, you can just be you and your cats and become like a plant mom or an animal mom, and that's okay. It's a lot better than being with a man. Or, it's better to be stuck in a forest with a bear than a man. And you hear a lot of those things and you suddenly look at how dark a lot of women view men in this sort of dark, sort of twisted way. And it starts to show you how a lot of radical feminism, a lot of today's radical feminism has twisted how a lot of women can actually view men, has twisted how a lot of women should actually view men. Because when you think about it, being in a relationship is a good thing. You don't have to look at men as all of these potential abusers. We're not all rapists at our core. Like, we're not all predators. You look at, the whole idea of being a breadwinner, it's not even about being the breadwinner. Like, yes, a man should provide and a man should be resourceful, but it's a lot better when the both of you guys are chipping in and trying to make the home a much better place. Like, it's good if you manage to succeed amongst men, but it's even better if you learn to succeed beyond what it is that you felt was your own limiting factors. Like, all of those things are particularly important. But when you center it on using men as like the yardstick, but at the same time the enemy, and at the same time like we're supposedly the problem of the planet Earth, like it just kind of skews the idea, which is what I don't like with a lot of radical feminists, and what a lot of those beliefs and ideologies have done to the minds of a lot of young women and even some young men. And, when I think about feminism, even away from the whole radical side of it, my view on it is different. I don't think of it as misogyny per se, even though maybe towards the end of this episode I might conclude that. But when I kind of think about it, I feel like women, more so millennial women, like for millennial women going upwards, were kind of fed this very dual idea of what a woman should be as a result of feminism, which ended up messing quite a lot of women in today's day and age. Now, just let me cook with this one, all right? So you go to school and you're a girl and you're pretty young. It's probably the early 2000s or some shit, or maybe even a little bit earlier, maybe a little bit later. It doesn't really matter. And when you're in class, or when you're even seated with your friends at an event or in church or at, whatever religious institution, or even at a trip, or if you're being mentored by someone, they will usually kind of give women two ideas of what they're supposed to be. There's the whole idea of you make sure you work hard, you get good grades, you go and finish school and get yourself a good job and have a fancy career, which is great. But then there's also the one where they're being told that, they'll grow up and they will meet with boys and they should get good men, or at least have very nice relationships with good boys so that they can get married, have a white picket fence, and live happily ever after. Now, those two ideas, those two stories are fed to a lot of women. And those two stories were fed to them when they were young girls. But the issue is they weren't sort of taught how to work with it, and they weren't taught that there's always going to be a trade-off. Now, this also happens with men because we are also fed some version of the same duality, but ours kind of complements, while with a lot of women it doesn't. So you find that there's a lot of women that went ahead, put in the work, they made sure they finished school, got good jobs, scaled up in their careers. Then by the time they hit the top and they were like, let me focus on like starting a family, making sure I have a good man with me and having some kids or something of the sort, they had suddenly aged quite a bit. And I don't speak of that in like a bad or a good way. It's just a time thing because it takes time to scale to the top. And, the list of guys that they could probably settle down with has dwindled. There's a lot of guys in the dating market that aren't as great, and the options aren't as good. And it's like time is not on their side. And it's like now they were so good at being the career woman that they ended up not doing that great in terms of getting a family. And, the higher up that you are, the more the job demands of you. And now it's like, even though she has kids, she now has to put a lot of priority to her work because she needs to preserve the income that she uses to spoil those kids. But she doesn't get to spend as much time with those kids, so their development might be a little bit hindered. Their relationship with their mother might be a little bit hindered. But then on this other side, there's this other young lady who went through school, finished, she had her relationships, got into something pretty solid very early on, or started having kids pretty early on. And she's a mom. She doesn't have the super high flying job, but she's got like a kid or two or three. And she seems to be doing pretty well for herself, but it's like she's not the high-flying professional that a lot of women would have wanted to be or would have wished her to be. But she is a mom and, she's doing a pretty good job at it. And, she may not be making that much, but she's a mom to some very adorable kids that love the fact that they have as much time with her as possible for their development. And now, of course, there's going to be a lot of women that are trying to balance both and be like, I could still be a high-flying professional and be a very present mom. And that's where the problem lies, because there's a lot of women that aren't able to do that and actually excel at both. Most times you find that there's usually that trade-off where you either choose to be a career woman and you won't be a very present mom, or you become a very present mom, but you won't be a high-flying career woman. And it's like now, depending on what you're particularly good at, you may lean one way or the other, or depending on your interests, you may lean one way or the other. And that now starts to become a problem, which can mean that, feminism did kind of hurt women quite a bit in as much as it did try to help them quite a bit. And for men, like I said earlier, it kind of complements us because we're expected to protect and provide and shit. And us guys being resourceful is a form of protection and provision, which kind of does work in our favor. But at the same time, it does still give us that option of having a trade-off where we can choose to be the high-flying sort of career professional dude and not be as present as a dad. But also at the same time, we can be a very present dad and not be a high-flying career professional. Now with us, we can be a high-flying career professional and still be a present dad because at least for the earlier years of the child's development, the dads aren't usually as necessary. And as the child is developing, as the child is growing older and the dad needs to be more involved, there's a very good chance that, a lot of that time is being taken up by school and friends and other things. So you kind of come in and you try to supplement and fill in with a lot of those empty gaps that might be there, which can come around the times when you're not necessarily needed to be in the office or do something particularly that important. So it can work for us. But with moms, with the kind of intensive quality of time and the amount of intensive care that you need to pay to your kids, it becomes particularly hard. So to kind of conclude all of this, feminism, like many things, actually got corrupted somewhere in its third act. Like first degree feminism, second degree feminism, it carried a lot of use in terms of helping women scale up and getting women very equal rights, and all of that shit was pretty great. But now, in today's day and age, I feel like feminism today is, in a lot of cases, actually against womanhood. It's actually against women and what women could probably benefit from doing a lot more when you look at the long term. Although, then again, I could be wrong about this, and I probably am, depending on who it is that's listening to this, but either way, I want your thoughts on it. The DMs are open. On IG, it is at the Breaktime_podcast. On Facebook, it is at the Breaktime Podcast. And on X, it is at Bagaka the D. Thank you so much for listening all the way till the end, and I will catch you guys on the next break.